Welcome back to Martins and More. My name is Maury Rutch.
And I'm Spoon Phillips.
And this episode is brought to you by the Martin 0028 Brook Lidgetwood. Brook Lidgetwood has seen wide-ranging global success across various genres and has long-standing and deep personal connection with Martin guitars. Her auditorium-style signature model is tastefully designed and was inspired by a combination of Brook's two favorite Martins, the OM42 Paul Simon and the Eric Clapton model. For more information on the 0028 Brook Lidgetwood, please visit maurysmusic.com today. Spoon, I suppose those used to be her favorite Martins, and now her new favorite Martin is her favorite new Martin, her new signature model? You're the Martin insider. You probably know that.
It's quite possible. For people who are not familiar with her, she, of course, started out in New Zealand and Australia and basically then went worldwide. You should check her out. And I was very happy with this instrument. I'm a big fan of the 0028 Eric Clapton and the OM42. At the time, I just heard, oh, well, she liked the Eric Clapton model. That's what she wanted to base it on. That's what I first heard. So when I actually got the thing in my hands and got to play it, very tastefully done. It does not have the herringbone around the edge of the top like the Clapton, nor that vintage style 21 herringbone around the rosette. It's got the pearl rosette, the abalone rosette, and then it has the black and white ply bindings of the style 28 guitars from the late 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s on up. And so it looks really nice, really cool. And it has a 1 11/16 inch nut like the OM42 Paul Simon. And so it is, basically a combination. And then it's got that nice headstock with what is sort of a wreath. I think they call it a wreath. It kind of looks to me like peace garlands or something like that on the top. And of what's probably an ebony faceplate. It's a very dark black faceplate. But anyway, a very cool guitar, short scale. For people who do not like that 1 3/4 inch nut, want the skinnier nut, here's an opportunity to get a really nice Indian rosewood guitar with a VTS Sitka top. So, or spruce top, and they may be qualifying for that new Sitka, might be the hybrid of Sitka. But anyway, check it out if you see one in the stores, or get a hold of Maury's Music if you're interested in getting one for yourself.
Yeah, we do have the natural top in stock, and it's interesting. You're basically getting a modern deluxe guitar with some features you can't get anywhere else, especially in modern deluxe. I'm a little bit surprised that, I didn't expect that model to take off like the CEO 7 or anything like that, but I am a little bit surprised it hasn't, garnered more traction so far. But as we're taping this late summer 2023, maybe this is the month. Maybe it's going to start hitting the fan, as they say, and we'll see if these two models, the Sunburst and the Natural, do take hold. But I think if you're looking for something like that and you go in any other direction, you're at least going to lose the VTS top. So before we accidentally make the whole show about that model is what's featured today. And if you have any questions about it, like Spoon said, give us a call or an email. Spoon, how you doing today? I never ask you that anymore.
Oh, well, I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. I'm having a good late summer 23 myself, and looking forward for football, both in terms of the American football and the English football that I follow. So I'm getting ready for fall, even though I love summer. How about you?
I'm exactly like you with half of that football stuff. The American stuff for me, the kicking the ball around thing, I'm not that much into, but I'm glad you like it, and I'll just leave it there. Now starts the time where one football team will determine my mood every Sunday for the next 17 weeks. I don't know how they do that, but...
I would just like to shout out to Laurie, my sympathies, ma'am. Okay, so what do we got in store today?
I got some good news and bad news. What do you want to hear first?
I would like to hear the good news.
We had somebody request that we talk about a really cool subject today, the beginnings of Maury's music and how Spoon got involved. That's the good news. The bad news is I wrote it down and lost the note, so I forget who asked this. And when we do these kind of things, it's not a joke. We do want to give you some credit. We do want to give you a shout out. Please accept my sincere apologies. Maybe I'll find out before this is edited, and I'll come in here and go whoosh, whoosh, and I'll put that name in here. But kidding aside, great topic, so you know who you are. And it comes up in some other podcasts, and certainly when we're talking on videos, a lot of people do want to know, how did Maury's music begin, and how did Spoon Phillips get involved? And I'll tell you, I did some research today. I was surprised. I want to start today's show with a trivia question that we will answer early because it's got everything to do with the subject at hand. Let me ask you, Spoon, and our listeners, from the time Maury's music opened their doors, and we're going to tell you that was 2003, how many years do you think it took us to get onto YouTube? And I don't mean the way we are now with these podcasts, and certainly not all these shows. What year did we debut by basically beginning to upload content to Maury's Music's YouTube channel? What year was that? How long of a span from the day we opened the physical store to the day we basically jumped into the YouTube space? I'm curious to see how many people think they know that answer. I was surprised to find out what I thought I knew and I didn't know.
Well, that's a very good question. I was thinking about this just recently when somebody was talking about Martin Fest and how different the world was back then in terms of people being in online forums and people uploading videos and stuff. And that was actually a very long time ago in the history of that stuff. And so that's an interesting question. I would be making a complete stab in the dark. I'll just say 5 years, but I think it's probably more than that.
The answer coming up. So where should we start?
It all started in a dark, stormy night. I just have to say, for those of you who remember Robert Goulet, the actor, singer, Broadway star, his Broadway biography in the playbills literally said something like that, and it all started on a stormy night, and it was just so full of ham, it was unbelievable. But anyway, I think we should do it this way because I wasn't aware of what we were going to be doing necessarily. I think maybe we should do the old-fashioned interview and let me ask you, because I have a lot of questions about that. I don't remember when a lot of things happen. So how about I sit down with not 20 questions about a guitar, but with, umpteen questions with Maury Rutch about the founding of Maury's music. What do you think?
I think that would be a lot of fun. And sidebar, when you get done watching this on YouTube, go find Will Ferrell doing Robert Goulet on Saturday Night Live. I forget what he's singing, but he's in a convertible car, and it's certainly worth your time after you get done with this. So that's on my mind now.
What? Goulet?
Start me off. I'll go back in time as much as I can pull off a little Marty McFly, and I'll be right honest with you guys from the jump. I'm going to get some of these dates wrong. My mind is not what it used to be, and even when it wasn't all that much. So,
how long was it from the time Maury's music opened until you stopped wearing shorts only and actually bought a pair of long pants? And was it before or after you were on YouTube?
Well, I'm wearing shorts right now. So, next question. It'll never change. I was so excited when YouTube introduced something called shorts.
It's for people who are not that familiar with Maury on a day-to-day basis. Back in the early UMGF days and the early Martin Fest days, which of course was the only time anybody saw him that was coming from out of town and wasn't in the area there, he was always wearing shorts. So people just got the impression that he never wore anything else. Just like the very first time I ever did the buzz haircut, with the sort of Paris Island. Was for the first Martin Fest because I knew it was going to be over 100 degrees every day. And I didn't realize that people for years thought that's how I wore my hair all the time, and which wasn't true. I would do it once a year for Martin Fest. But anyway, let's go back. So you were a gigging musician in Pennsylvania, and you were basically living in the area pretty much where you grew up. And how did you go from being a gigging musician to having a Martin dealership?
Well, the early days, I was actually working full-time as a musician 4 or 5 nights a week. And the genesis of me, or Lori and I, beginning to sell Martin guitars and be a store, and how it all really started, the little seed that was planted, was us selling bone saddles. We made bone saddles out of blanks because I recognized, as being a UMGF member, That was one of those parts that was very popular back then in those days. I'm showing my age, and I'm showing your age if you're listening and you remember this. Martin guitars were, they had plastic saddles, micarta saddles, and a very popular modification was to buy a saddle made of bone and do the upgrade, which I would still consider as an upgrade. And so we started buying blanks and making bone saddles, and not long after that, we thought it might be smart. We were selling on eBay at the time. Might be smart to try to sell strings and parts. So we applied to Martin and asked them, can we become what they called an accessories dealer? So the very, very beginning of this whole thing was we'd buy bone blanks and make them into saddles with a Dremel tool and sandpaper and belt sanders. And we also were a reseller for Martin parts, capos, strings, and that sort of thing. So that was the plant the seed in the ground, you know.
And what year would that have been, do you think, approximately, of when you moved from just being a cottage industry saddle maker to actually having a connection to Martin?
That would have been the spring of 2003.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, because I do remember you basically just being, when I met you, you were just a musician. And then I think, and that would have been in 2002, and at the first Martin Fest. And so it was just a year later that you got connected with Martin. So that is fascinating. So just so people know, a lot of people have heard this, but since it was part of the original question, I and a friend of mine named Tony Phillips came into Nazareth. We pulled into Nazareth, feeling about half-past melted because it was a zillion degrees. We pulled into the Pizza Hut there and went in and had a pizza and pitchers of beer because it was ice cold there. And we didn't get to the park for a long time. And we finally get to the park. And literally as we're walking from the parking lot over and up this concrete stairway that goes up this green hill to this cabin in the middle, about in the middle of the hill there in Borough Park, there are people playing guitar. And I literally heard people singing, I pulled into Nazareth feeling about half past dead. And there was Dick Boak, who I'd never met in person before, and Maury Rutch, though I didn't really meet Maury until the next day. He was just one of the people milling around. But that's where we first met up, and then the next day we actually found out we had a lot of musical tastes in common. But that was the beginning of, as Humphrey Bogart says at the end of Casablanca, a beautiful friendship. So there you are. So there you are in 2003, and you're beginning to sell Martin accessories as an accessory dealer. And I didn't really remember even that they had accessory dealers back in those days. How did you make the quantum leap from being an accessories dealer to being one of the most popular Martin guitar dealers in the nation?
Well, before I answer that, I just want to tell you, listening to your part, I'm sweating right now. It's 70 degrees here in the Maury's Music Studio, but just hearing you talk about NazFest really makes me feel like it's 91 and 600% humidity. So you're either very descriptive or it was really, really hot that day. And it always is.
Very good. NazFest being what we initially called it back then, that just happened to come out of the zeitgeist. But eventually I think they realized Martin kind of wanted their name mentioned in it, so we switched over to Martin Fest in the early years.
But to answer your question, I'm sorry, if I ever say Martin Fest, I will say NazFest right after, Martin Fest right after that. I can't pick one, and I never think about it. But to make the quantum leap to doing the guitars, I'm sure it was less than a year. I really feel like we started selling accessories, and the feeling comes over me every time I talk about this to anybody. As soon as we recognized we could sell bone saddles and the strings and accessories started to work, it wasn't any harder to sell accessories and strings compared to selling bone saddles. So my brain, for better or worse, immediately went to, well, then why don't we just sell the whole guitar? If Martin lets us sell their strings and their parts, and people are trusting us through the word of mouth we've built up because I'm a forum member who's becoming a seller, why don't we see if Martin will let us do the guitars as well? So I'm sure I could go on record to say it was the same year. If it was the spring of 2003 that we were selling parts and strings, by the summer of that year, boy, it'd be funny. Maybe it was a month. I probably sold my first 4 packs of strings and said, hey, let's turn this over. And it felt that fast. So I know it was within a very short amount of time Don't let anybody tell you that we sold strings and parts for a couple of years and took these baby little steps towards the guitars. That is false. It was almost immediate. And as the story goes, I remember asking Martin, we've been selling your strings and your parts. Can I apply to become a real dealer to sell your instruments? And they said, sure. So I put the application in, and I waited what seemed to be like 5 or 6 months. It was probably 4 or 5 days. And I let it go a couple of weeks, and I finally called back and I said, I have to ask, I haven't heard back yet. Are we approved to become a regular standard Martin dealer for your guitars? They said, oh, yeah, you were approved immediately. We're just trying to think of how much credit to give you. That's like, oh, of course. Almost like, why would you think you wouldn't be? And this sense of relief and what came over me, and it just all happened like a light switch. And I don't know if you guys would be the same in my shoes, but as soon as I heard that, we just dove in completely. Every bit of our being was just aimed at, let's become a really good, solid Martin dealer, and let's ride the amount of goodwill and trust that we've built up by selling parts. And if we've made a number of eBay customers happy, and we were just building a website, let's do the same thing. And if people can tell each other, trust Maury, well, get a D28 instead of just getting strings or a Martin guitar strap and those sort of things. So it was very, very quick. And talking about it now, it feels like it was lifetimes ago, but it was a real fast stepping stone from bone saddles to strings to guitars. All happened in a course of a very, very short amount of time.
And I do remember those days fairly clearly. I kind of, at first you were in Pennsylvania, I was here, and I wasn't paying that much attention to it. I had relationships with dealers here, particularly Matty Umanoff and Stan Jay at Mandolin Brothers, and would haunt the guitar stores, all of them, all the time, even though I didn't, even before I could even had my first Martin. And but I do remember that all coming about. Back in those days, particularly, a lot of people may not know this that have never been there, but C.F. Martin and Company is one of the oldest family-owned businesses in the United States. The cymbal maker, when it comes to musical instrument makers in Boston, I can't remember what they're called. The Z, you might remember the name of the cymbal.
Zildjian?
That begins with Zildjian. Thank you. Yeah, they're officially the oldest musical instrument maker in America. But they, of course, came from Europe, just like Martin did. But Martin has always been a family business, and I think they're still currently the oldest family-owned business of any kind in America, with more than, I think, 300 employees or 400 employees or something, whatever it is. They're older than Levi Strauss and all that. But they remained a family business, like a small business, really, up until they built a new factory in 1960. And even then, they still had the mentality of a small family business, and the people that worked at the plant, generational people. We know several people that are our age or younger whose grandparents worked at the factory, or uncles and aunts worked at the factory. Dick Boakes loves to impersonate some of the best Pennsylvania Deutsch guys that still have the Pennsylvania Deutsch accent. Very, very down-home people. And I've said this behind Maury's back a lot over the years, that Maury and Laurie are the closest thing to knowing people from Bedford Falls in It's a Wonderful Life as I've ever met.
Oh my God!
And you forget, I grew up in that environment. I grew up in the town where the guy who owned the photo shop, everybody would come in and they would talk, and that very small town sort of thing, and everybody said hello to each other in the street, and all those things that doesn't happen where I transplanted to, and I have to remind myself it still happens across the South and the Midwest and out West and particularly in smaller communities. But anyway, I knew immediately, before I even knew you guys well, it was pretty obvious to anybody who did know you and knew you from Martin Fest, why it was that you became a Martin dealer basically overnight in a ridiculous amount of time. I'll flat guarantee you that probably has never happened in the history of Martin guitar before, where somebody, particularly since they became a real, international entity, that somebody went from saddle maker to Martin dealer, from 0 to 60, because they met you and they knew you and they recognized the fact that you guys are very genuine, honest, honorable, funny people, and you fit right in to that culture in that part of Pennsylvania. And I'm sure people at Martin recognized that. So they weren't surprised that they were just trying to figure out how much credit you were going to get. But just being the way you guys are, I can see why you would think that way. So I've never had any problem at all, recommending you guys for anything at all, even though I've tried to maintain my neutral stance on my own website, One Man's Guitar. I'm always recommending that people support their dealers and whoever they feel is their dealer and that they like and trust. But I would, without batting an eye, I would also recommend Maury's music. And that was before we became in any way formally associated. So do you remember how we became more formally associated?
Well, first, thank you to bring that Bedford Falls thing back. That is the most warm my heart thing I'll ever hear. And I have heard it before. And every time you say it, whether it's on the airwaves or not, that's top stuff. So thank you. And Lori and I, that movie just moves us. So that's a great reference. Looking back at some information here on my computer to try to find out when to talk about certain dates. I'm having a hard time deciding when you and I can't remember the conversation, if it was across one or two conversations, or if it certainly wasn't accidental, but my foggy memory of this would have said, well, we probably became a store in 2003. I had met you in 2002, so we were probably working together in 2003. That's not the case. I'm surprising myself, and I teased a trivia question at the beginning of this episode. That answer is right around the corner from this, but I don't remember exactly how or when we decided to get together. I'm looking at some dates on my screen where I know we started doing some YouTube videos. I'm unpleasantly surprised it took that long, and maybe I should just cut to the chase. By 2003, we were a Martin dealer. I'm really shocked to tell you that let me put it this way, the very first time Maury's music did anything on YouTube, to answer that trivia question, is the year 2006.
So it was 3 years.
It was December of 2006,
Okay.
3 years, yep.
So I said 5 years because I thought the way you phrased the question, it was going to be shockingly later. So it was 2000. So that wasn't that shockingly later. So it was 3 years from the time you moved from just being a website and an eBay seller to video. Well, this is how I remember it. So I had a lot of people may know this that's listening to this, but I had been haunting the guitar stores in New York City and putting my reviews up on web forums before the UMJF was around. And basically, I would say I went to Mandolin Brothers this weekend on Saturday, or I went to Matt Humanoff's, or I went to these different guitar stores that were in and around New York City. And I would mention the guitars that I saw and the guitars that I played, and I got a lot of good response about it. And I got some flaming, because of my wanting to resort to using a metaphor from talking about food and wine to whatever, to talking about the way I try to discuss tone and try to mention tone, and was always happy when people from various places around the world would say, I own that model, and you actually absolutely described how it sounds. And so that was always good to hear. But so I was doing that, and then I started my own website finally. And then I started putting reviews of the guitars that I would go see at Mandolin Brothers and Matt Humanoff's and Tom Crandall's and other people's shops, and eventually the Guitar Center showed up and all that. The old 48th Street shops where Sam Ash used to be and Rudy Pence's shop used to be, and all those shops. And Mayonnaise, thank you. That's what that's the word I was looking for. And so I would go into those stores and I would write my reviews to tell people about it. And I know some people bought guitars based on my reviews, and we're happy that they did. So I started my own website and I started doing that. And then at some point, and I don't remember if it was before or after the opening of your shop, I think it might have been before the opening of the shop. And what was the grand opening date of the shop? The first shop.
Ooh, that's going to be April-ish, 2003. I don't know the date.
So, and this shop was in an early 20th century home. Might have been Edwardian period home, an old-fashioned family home on a street that had become what's basically Main Street, with the right next door to it was a movie theater and the little, the little diner is all there and all that sort of thing. So those buildings were had been converted into commercial spaces by that time. So I do know that Maury and Laurie invited me to come to the grand opening and do a sort of an unofficial clinic of playing different guitars that were for sale and talking about them. Now, either right before that or right after that, Laurie approached me asking me if I would be interested in writing some kind of article for the website so you guys had some sort of content. And so we kind of went back and forth, and then ultimately she offered, to my great surprise, to ship me a D18 Golden Era to do my style of a guitar review for your website. And so that's the very first thing I ever did for Maury's Music, was my review of the D18 GE. And she said, and then you guys later on came to me with the video idea, and she was adamant about, I don't want you to change anything. I want you to do what you do for your website. I just want you to do it for us. And that's where they came from. One man's guitar, when I wear the sweater and was in the Martin sound room, and I wore the green sweater because it matched the green background in the soundproofing in the Martin sound testing room. I wanted to be as anonymous as possible, and the one man's guitar was supposed to be, because I would do this for private people too. I would do reviews of their guitars, and they were supposed to be the one man. It was supposed to be one man's guitars, and I was going to start reviewing guitars in private collections. That was my initial idea. When she came to me by that time, she said, I want you to do the exact same thing. That's why when I started doing the reviews for you, I wore the same sweater. And eventually you started to see me. A bunch of people began to know who I was. Then you would see me wearing my wool English cap and all that stuff. But that's where it began with, that's how we got connected. We got connected originally as friends through Martin Fest. And then Laurie approached me about starting to write some reviews. And so I started writing my own reviews, and then I would write a version for you when I would go see the new models at the factory, for example. And that's really where we first got connected. And then you would ask me to come do the clinic thing, and I went and did the clinic thing. That's where I met Tim Teal for the first time. He wanted me to start doing Martin clinics, but it got... and Dick was all for it. He hooked me up with Dick, and I even got the head of acoustic guitars at Guitar Center out in the Northwest to agree to doing a clinic in New York City, but then it got shot down from some internal people inside of Martin. Mainly the rep at that time didn't want to have anything to do with clinics. He was an old curmudgeon that's not been with the factory for years. And another guy in there who kind of saw himself as his little power fiefdom included clinics. So he wasn't happy that Dick Boak and Tim Teal were deciding this, and he kind of torpedoed it. He's not with I can say this now because he's not with the company anymore either. But anyway, so that's how it happened. I did my first thing with Maury's Music in person at the opening of the store. That was a wonderful party. We had a great time. You guys had people playing on the stage at the movie theater. Your friends at the movie theater let you use that as a performance space. And I remember you had the Nakashima, the first Nakashima model there at that time. You had a OM35. I'm trying to remember what else I played that day, and kind of talked about the history of the OM, the history of Style 35, and how they came together in the OM35 and all that. I had a total blast. So that was my first trip to Coaldale, and you can't get rid of me. I keep coming back.
It's a little bit unnerving to remember it this way, but that was such a great day. I bet you a lot of shop owners would remember their very first big important event and just remember the headaches and the stress and how is everything going to work out. For whatever reason, that memory of mine is really positive, and it felt like most of the things, if not everything you want to happen, fell into place really nicely. We had Spoon, we had Howard Emerson, our friend Bill Koonsman, Maury and Tim did some music, and it probably went a lot quicker than I remember, but it was a very, very nice full day. The pieces are falling into place now as far as me hearing you talk. It makes a little bit more sense that you and I did get together long before the YouTube stuff. It was in my memory backwards where I just started to assume when you and I first did get together and we brought you into Maury's music, it was just videos from the jump. And that's not true at all. I mentioned a little while ago that 2006 was the very first video that Maury's music put on YouTube. And I'll still remember talking to our webmaster, and we said, we're going to do these videos now of guitars. I know we're going to put them on the website. And the year is 2006, obviously. And I said to him, should we put them on YouTube too? And he's like, couldn't hurt. And the whole mindset of him back then was like, I'm going to try it. Like, tell somebody now, YouTube might be a good idea for a video. I mean, that's where everything lives. But back then, there was an opportunity that I almost didn't.
Do you remember what your first video was on YouTube?
I had to look it up. I'm gonna ask you guys in the audience, if you're listening to this in your car or if you're listening to this on YouTube, I'm gonna give you a 10-second head start. Which Martin guitar model do you think was my first video? And this is before Spoon was involved. What was the first Martin video on YouTube from the Maury's Music channel? I'll give you a hint. It's popular again.
Oh, good heavens. So we're going back to 2003, and it's popular now.
2006.
2006, and it's popular now. I'm going to say the D18.
Ooh, very, very close. The OMJM.
No kidding. Well, what do you know about that?
Yep. If you go to Maury's Music YouTube and search videos and search by date and click that button to go from the newest to the oldest, I don't recommend you do it because a lot of stuff back then isn't good looking. But yeah, the OMJM, it was my first foray into it. It predates the chords I play now, that whole D, C, G, E minor. That's way before that. That's another good trivia question. When did that start? But yeah, the OMJM.
What do you know? Now that's a great transition then, because I first saw my first OMJM at your shop, but it wasn't that shop. So let's go. It was at the grand opening of the second shop where you had a party and a bunch of UMGFers came from the New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York area. And I don't remember if the late Dave Kaskeski came up for not from Delaware, but people came from all over the place to go to the opening of your second shop. And when would that have happened?
Well, Dave was at the first one. That might be what you're remembering. He was the first person at the first store.
Oh, wow.
So that's a big thing for me. And I remember he was the guy that taught me that joke. Hey, you got some up dog in your hair. And I would say, what's up, dog? Nothing. He was the guy that taught me that joke. Lots of great memories of him, but that's in the front. It was 2004. He probably told it to everybody that day. 2004, maybe late in the year. It was the winter time, so it wasn't very long. We recognized that the heating system in the first building wasn't exactly as reliable or always on as we wanted it to be with having those guitars in there. And a big shout out to our friend, mutual friend, Bruce Atkins. It was one of those really weird times. You're talking about Bedford Falls and people helping people. Bruce Atkins actually used his own car to help us move guitars from one building to another in not an emergency, but almost emergency. So, Bruce, hope you're doing well. It was good to see you back at NASFest, Martin Fest. See, 2004 is when we moved into the new building. And that would have been the brown paneling on the walls, and that was the if you took 2nd Street, if you turned off the highway and climbed 2nd Street to go to the original store, well, the second store was actually on 2nd Street, so it was on the hill. That was 2004 to 2000, at least a couple years. I don't want to cross the timeline too far here, but it was 04, and that was a lot more room. We had a little stage in there. Had Howard Emerson back again, and that was I recently found pictures of that event not long ago, and it's pretty wild to look at.
Oh, you'll have to share them with me. I'll have to see how skinny I really am back then. But I also, I remember I was very impressed. Even I think back in the first store that you ordered D28s and D18s with 1 3/4 inch neck, if I remember correctly. One nut width. Do you remember that? You did like a run of those.
Oh yeah, yep.
And that was, I thought that was pretty impressive to be aware of what people were saying online. And so very predating the reimagined versions of those guitars, you were ordering them. And were they allowed to be stamped D28 back then? Were you allowed to do the nut change and still have the stamp, or were they custom? I don't remember.
Yeah, it was a custom shop, but back then, if you only made a couple of revisions, I think you had to keep it under 3 changes, and it was still called D28. And not to take credit, because it was just another side effect of being on the forum. I'm on the forum all day, as a player and shop owner, so it's still being ingrained. I mean, it's 2023, and I'm still on the forum a lot. Being on those threads where you're seeing people complain, I want a wider nut, I want a wider nut. Well, just like we saw people wanted bone saddles, and I can't find any. We tried to keep our finger on the pulse there, and frankly, I think it would have been foolish of us not to recognize, hey, how many days am I going to go to that forum and see people crying about the need for 1 3/4, and not go to Martin and say, listen, make some up. And we didn't have to buy a million of them. We just ordered, dozens and dozens at a time, and if they didn't sell as fast as something else, it wasn't a big deal to us. Again, not knowing what's proper and not to, only being in business since '03. We didn't have any accountant telling us what we should or shouldn't invest in, or nobody told us how much inventory to carry, or you're getting, you're not liquid enough, those sort of things. Still haven't. I mean, spoiler alert, I still don't have anybody telling me how to do any of this, so it's not like it eventually happened. But I certainly didn't have it back then.
Well, the other thing around that same time that I thought was another very cool thing is that you ordered custom guitars that were the OM35, which has come and gone. People remember the OM35. It had a low profile 1 3/4 inch bound neck and the 3-piece back, but it was basically, the typical Sitka Indian 1/4 inch bracing. But you ordered it in short scale, so it was essentially a triple O35. And I remember seeing those at the second store. And of course, the one that our friend Reese Ord bought and still loves, and is still his main Martin guitar. So that was also a very smart and cool thing to do, I thought.
Hey, Reese, thank you.
So that brings us up to the second store. So how many years were in the second store? You were there from approximately when to approximately when?
That's when it gets really fuzzy, because we actually left that store before we had the current store ready. So there was this interim time where we had moved out physically, and we were actually keeping inventory in our home very temporarily. Boy, when I think of how do we make any of that work, because we've never been a store with a low number of guitars. We've always had a big inventory, and there was basically an interim where the Second Street store with the paneling, that's over. We're out of there and moving into a newer place, but it's not quite ready. We didn't have the luxury of staying in the second place longer than we wanted to. So I would say that was probably 04 to 06. Boy, it couldn't have been 2 years, but maybe a year and a half. Because I remember Martin would ask us every other Thursday, hey, did you get a new building yet? Like, what's going on? And we did, but it wasn't, inhabitable yet. So if I don't have the luxury of looking this up, I'll say 04 to 06 was the second store. 06 to 07, 08 maybe was working from home. And then, boy, I wish I had that in front of me. That's what it feels like, and I could be wrong by a couple years.
So, yeah, and I do remember that. I remember one time coming to visit you, and the house was basically a store, or a big chunk of your house was basically a store.
Pretty much. Too much.
And I also remember very clearly I had to come downstairs from the bedrooms to get, I don't know, something I had left down there in the middle of the night. And, maybe something as stupid as, eyeglass cleaner or my eyeglasses or something. And there you were, the two of you, in the deep middle of the night, in your pajamas, for all intents and purposes, filling orders and filling boxes for shipping and doing doing your work in your bathrobes and pajamas in the middle of the night.
Don't get too descriptive now. Just dial it back a little bit.
That's all right. I won't mention anything about the polka dots or the Snoopy,
just stop.
Snoopy
just
slippers
stop.
or anything like that.
And you better not talk about Lori's outfit.
Exactly. Yeah. So you guys have definitely talked about dedication. And 24/7, you certainly earn your vacations when you go off to Cape Cod or go off to the seashore. I believe you me. So then you basically take off, and internet business dealerships take off, and you're one of the premier dealers. When people would go on YouTube or go on Google or something like that and start searching for Martins, you guys were starting to pop up on page one all the time. And, and I have to say, I was like, I know those guys, I know those people. And that, that's such a small, his and her, shop with the help of your brother and the occasional other person that has passed through briefly. It's a remarkable success story, frankly, to it's kind of like being on the cover of the Rolling Stone, being on page one of Google. It was like being on the cover of the Rolling Stone, as the old song used to say.
Well, to wheel backwards a little bit on the timeline, the very first store was our complete dedication to the walk-in customer and the brick and mortar side of it. And we tried and tried and tried and recognized it wasn't working. And then we decided, because the very first idea was treat the people walking through the door first. And if you have time, well, wait to hear this. If you have time, answer the email or the phone. Like, wow, I can't believe that we didn't sync. And as soon as we flipped that, we decided, let's try to make the person coming in the door wait until we're off the phone to help them, wait until we're off the email. It more than tripled, like a light switch. So we recognized we're going to, keep store hours, but we're going to really lean heavy on the internet stuff. And not to interrupt you, but it was the very first building and the second building. Even while we were, in a physical location doing the brick and mortar thing, we were using the brick and mortar room to basically work the internet, and it's never changed since. So now, fast forward to today, the showroom's still temporarily closed just because we don't have any room right now, but it's more than 99.5% internet sales with us, and even those little pieces of a percent of people that want to buy something here are finding us on the website or on YouTube and driving from Philly or driving from Delaware or New York. There is no for better or worse, there's no local business here. Twice a week we get phone calls locally, and it's always, do you want to buy a piano? My friend found a mandolin, what is it worth? Things nothing to do with acoustic guitars or retail, and it's just not, we're in the wrong physical location. But meshing this together with some of the things you said a few moments ago, talking about the importance of YouTube, I did mention 2006 was the very first Maury's music video on YouTube, but I think it's probably the time of the show now to at least ask you, is this going to intersect with what you're talking about timeline-wise when you were on our YouTube channel, or are we not there yet?
No, I think so. I think that's fine to go ahead. I mentioned it already back then, that, how I started to do the videos.
So I'll ask everybody, including Spoon, when do you think the first Maury's Music Spoon Phillips video aired on YouTube? Just give me the year, and I'll give you some more information.
I haven't the foggiest notion. That's interesting, because I like the written stuff. I started going to the Martin factory in the lobby and just started shooting videos of the new videos, of the new stuff, and started putting online. And then eventually, Mike Dickinson arranged for me to start using the sound room so I could get really, better sound without interruption and all that. And then, you guys, that's when, Lori came to me and asked if I'd be willing to do the same thing for you guys. And originally I didn't expect to be a spokesmodel, but with my long, luxurious hair, as it is. And so I, expected to do the anonymous one man's thing too, because she was basically asking me to do what I did there, or you did by that time. I think you were in the driver's seat. She must have been out of town, and and so I came in and started doing talking about the models, extemporaneously as I do, and I'm trying to stall for time because I'm going back into time.
You're avoiding the question really well.
I'm avoiding the question, but really, I, as my father would have said, I haven't the foggiest notion of when it was. I don't know if it was. It's got to be more than 5 years.
January 25th, 2013.
10 years. Oh my gosh, 10 years after the store opened, and also 10 years this past year. We missed the anniversary.
We did.
How depressing.
But I mean, can you believe that you and I knew each other for 12 years before you appeared on a video on our YouTube channel for Maury's music? I wonder if this is a typo, but I found the video. It's the D45A. You're in the Martin Sound Room, and actually that's part one of this two-part banger. That was January 25th, the beginning of the year 2013. You did a D45 authentic video from the Martin Sound Room, and back then we must have been not sharing footage, but my camera's on you and so is yours.
Yeah, sharing time. Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. So that was the beginning of the year. It wasn't until July 15th, 2013, that you appeared on a video for Maury's Music shot at Maury's Music, and I can't believe that.
That's pretty cool. That's really interesting. You'll have to go back. So you said it was the D25A. So we'll have to find out what, D45A rather. You'll have to find out. And man, I love those guitars. I just love the original D4. You're talking about the authentic, yes? Not an Adirondack top D45.
Yeah, the authentic, yeah.
Yeah, man, I just love those guitars. I think there was a financial downturn and they dropped them, or maybe that was when the first Brazilian rosewood crisis hit, supply chain crisis. But they didn't make them for very long, and this was back before they were making the authentics out of based on a particular real guitar, trying to replicate a real one specific Martin, where they're just using the 1930s techniques for bracing primarily and hide glue. Before they had discovered the letter about how they did the semi-gloss finish for the 28s, and before they started really paying attention to how thin the fretboards were and all that stuff. But my gosh, those are spectacular guitars. It was one of the first things I'd ever do if I picked up a winning lottery ticket off the ground and turned it in, as I'd try to track down one of those original D45 authentics. But anyway, you should find out. I suggest we find out what the first video I did was for you this year, and then you can just change the wording on the YouTube and say that it's the 10th anniversary Spoon Phillips video review. I have no idea what it would be, but
I don't have enough to do, so I will take that challenge and I will accept it. And I will tell you, instead of asking you too many questions, because I have to ask you 20 very soon, the July 15th, 2013, that video where you first appeared on our YouTube channel was for the Martin D. John Sebastian. Do you remember that?
Wow, that was a very cool guitar too. Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, I remember playing that at the factory too, playing one of the prototypes at the factory before it came out. And how about that? That's trivia. That's what I call trivia, because I do not remember that at all. So very cool. So thank you for reminding me. Good times.
Really, this has been fun for me so far, because I'm learning things I forgot. And if somebody would have bumped into us this past Martin Fest and said, "Hey, how'd you guys get started? When did you guys start doing videos?" I would have never said 2013. It still doesn't feel like an accuracy. But
yeah, I knew it was more than 5 years, but I was like, could it really be 10 years? And it was, in fact, 10 years. Because I have the advantage of remembering that I didn't do the music room videos right away. I was doing them in the lobby for several years, and then I was doing them in a hallway at Martin for several years. Not several years, maybe 2 years. And then some old biddy buddy, said it was a fire hazard. It wasn't even remotely a fire hazard. I was in a little nook. And people could walk right by me to the fire exit without, banging into the guitar. But that's when Mike said, "Okay, fine. People are going to complain about him here. Let's just put him in the sound room," and that was that. So,
we'll just give him a much better room and cater to him all day long. And it reminds me of that Mitch Hedberg where, if you're standing in front of a fire exit, it says, "Hey, if you have legs and there's a fire, there is no such thing as standing in front of a fire exit."
Absolutely. Well, that reminds me of a little thing, too, because when I went in there, I was a little self-conscious that do the people upstairs know about this? And that within, the first time I was there, the first Martin, the first NAMM show, where I went in, instead of going out to California, I go to the factory and they usually make two models, one for the show and one to keep at the factory, and I would do the review of the ones that didn't go to the show. And in comes, in the same day, Jeff Allen and Fred Green. So we were talking, that anybody who had any problem about me doing this stuff, the moment it was clear that Jeff Allen and Fred Green came by to talk to me and jaw and ask my opinion about the models and stuff, they all scurried off into wherever they came from, because that was the kind of, that was the stamp of approval that let me know that yes, that the executives know about this and are happy that I'm doing this. So that was nice.
Exactly, and fortunate. They might not say it, but they do say it behind closed doors. That I've heard people tell me, one of the things we have to do when these new models comes out, we have to get a hold of Spoon.
A lot of people never knew that I didn't work for Martin. I never certainly made a cent doing that stuff for Martin. It was all something I wanted to do originally for the guitar forums and then for my own website, and they were happy to have me do it. Only recently have I had any formal connection to Martin where they hired me to write some stuff for their journal. And that's I wrote some articles for their annual journal. That's been my only official business connection to Martin ever, because I never wanted to be a Martin employee, because I need to be able to tell the truth, and when I write my reviews on my website, I can't have a gag order at all about that stuff.
Exactly, and for what it's worth, what I meant was in the spirit of journalism. Like they know that it's another outlet, like the Premier Guitar is going to get one of these, so Spoon has to see them too, that kind of thing.
But it's also the kind of thing where Jeff would slip me the actual drafting drawings, of that show that the measurements actually go down to like this fifth decimal point sometimes. Like for instance, the CO7, they say that it's this tall and this wide or whatever. The actual measurements are down to decimalness, and they're not exactly what they say they are. Little things like that, and like the Outlaw, I have the schematics for the Outlaw model that Jeff put together that was a lot, using authentic things outside the authentic series, stuff like that. So I get little tidbits and inside stuff that I definitely cherish, because it informs me, it allows me to inform other people. But knowing that there's lots of things I don't say and I don't tell people about, because then they wouldn't tell me anything anymore. I'm aware of that too. But it also helps me inform me when I'm doing my reviews for Maury's music. So and like Maury says, he's he may get his dates wrong or whatever. Sometimes when the spirit is on me and I am testifying about a particular Martin model at Maury's music, and it is impromptu, and sometimes I will misremember and say the wrong spec or get my models mixed up, especially if I'm doing 10 videos across 2 days, or more.
Yeah, you wish. More like 24.
For the most part, I know what I'm talking about. And it's fun to do. So it's always an excuse to come, particularly nice weather, so I can swim in your swimming pool, which I didn't get to do this year. But
I just closed it up, and that's when the weather went to 94 degrees 7 days in a row. So.
Wasn't it? I was proud of the fact that I did not turn on my air conditioner all year, and I had to turn it on Sunday night, because I was about to, on Monday night rather, when I got back from my trip, and it's still on right now, because this is the busiest day. I'm in a very busy period right now work-wise, and there's no way I'm going to sit in here working on deadlines and taking lots of calls and stuff from people in a sauna. So I'm sitting, I have to have the air conditioner on. But I made it all the way through August. Didn't have my air conditioner on once, but I have succumbed. But
well, do you feel like you can make it all the way through 20 questions? That's the question.
20 questions. So I guess I have to ask this time, don't I?
You've got to guess what I'm thinking of this time.
Very good. For those of you who are unfamiliar, 20 questions. The smart guy, being Maury, is going to think of a Martin guitar that is still available for sale today. Either it's still in production, but it's either, it's on the website, or you can buy it in stores. And I have 20 questions to try to figure out which Martin guitar he's thinking of. And up to 3 of those questions can be guesses of a particular model.
Okay, I am thinking of a guitar. 20 questions on the clock, and go.
Is it the J40?
No. Good guess.
I was following my instincts. Okay, so that's one question down. Is this guitar manufactured in Nazareth, Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Is this guitar have a dreadnought body size?
Yes.
So that's 3 questions. We know it's a Nazareth-made dreadnought. Does this guitar have the traditional full-size dovetail neck joint?
No.
Okay, so we've eliminated the Authentic series, the Modern Deluxe series, and the Standard series. Does this guitar have the traditional dreadnought depth?
Yes.
Does this guitar have 14 frets free from the body?
Yes.
That's 6. Does this guitar have square shoulders?
No.
That's 7. Okay,
That's money.
maybe. Now I've got to try to remember which ones are currently made with sloped shoulders. Is this the D17?
Can you spell the name more accurately and more correctly?
Is this a D17 that is available either in Black Smoke or Whiskey Sunset?
Yes.
Yippee! That's 8. That may be my record. I may have tied my record for 8.
You're not done. You haven't named it. This is like Wheel of Fortune.
It's the D17. The D17 qualifies whether it's the Whiskey Sunset or the Black Smoke.
I want the full name of this model. There's no such thing as a D17. That's the one Nicole plays from the late 90s. I want to hear
Oh, I beg your pardon. Wait a second. What do they call these now? Is this the DS17? No, they call it D17S? I don't remember. No!
That's 9.
No! Oh, come on.
I don't want to hear a keyboard clicking. That's 9 questions.
Oh, come on. I've always just called it the D17. All right, so we have a sloped shoulder. Oh, is it a DSS17?
DSS 17 Whiskey Sunset.
Okay, DSS17. You got me. Fair's fair. I feel like Wally Cox in Hollywood Squares. But I will say, okay, so that's 10. So I didn't tie my record. It took 10 questions to do that. But still not.
Well, you did really good. I knew I wasn't going to string you along for 10 more questions, but for a split second I thought, wow, what if he says 8 more incorrect titles? I might have him on the hook. Let's be really honest now and bring some more value back to the program. What is the D17 I'm talking about that our friend Nicole plays? Describe the difference.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, this would require a lengthy discussion of the history of Style 17, which I'll not do very much. But 17, the modern, what I consider the modern era, so post-Woodstock, let's say 1970 onward, they brought out the 17. Style 17 meant a fancier version of Style 18. So, Style 15. So they brought out the modern Style 15 that was a mahogany top, back and sides, with no binding and no purfling and a satin finish. And then they decided to bring out the 17, which had some kind of gloss finish. I honestly don't remember if it was a traditional nitrocellulose or if that's when they first started playing around with other catalyzed finishes. I don't remember. So it was a gloss finish. It had a very thin white line purfling and some other trim. I'm pretty sure it's bound, but I don't remember if it's bound in tortoise or what it's bound in. And they only made it the D17 at first. And it is, and the bracing is different. It doesn't have the same bracing as the typical 15. I think the bracing is more along the lines of what the 16s had in those days, which is called the hybrid bracing, to go along with the neck joint at that time. I think this is going way back. Maybe it had the same bracing, but I don't remember. So anyway, that has nothing to do with the modern 17s. Those things were retired, and they were briefly replaced by a D17 and a triple O, long scale slope shoulder triple O 17, and they probably had some sort of little, that would have probably been a triple O 17S, and the D17 might have just said D17. It had kind of an odd reddish finish on it, reddish sunbursty finish, almost like a nectarine, as I remember. And those didn't last very long at all. Pretty sure Nicole's D17 is either ebony fretboard and bridge or it might be micarta, and I don't remember what those other short-lived 17s were. Those went away. So style 17 went away, and then in modern times, they came out. Chris Martin wanted to do guitars that paid homage to the guitars from the Depression era that were less expensive, simply appointed, and were sold in mail order catalogs like Montgomery Ward and Sears Roebuck. And that's where they came out with the Whiskey Sunset and the Black Smoke models. And you could get a 14 fret triple O, you could get a 12 fret double O. And did they have a dread originally at first? I think they had a 14 fret dread. Or am I misremembering that? Gosh, I can't believe I can't remember this. I probably need some protein. I think my memory's going. But they came out with the Black Smoke. And
I thought you weren't going to go into a big deep dive on the history of the 17s.
I know. Okay, so that's it. So then they came out with the new stuff. Well, that is a very short version of the history of Style 17, believe me. But they came out with the new 17s, very lightly built. They don't even use pore filler, so you can feel the wood through the very thin satin finish. So they have a very special sound, and I really like them. And then they came out with the DSS, and that's what it was the right thing to do. Having that sloped shoulders increases the bass response for that lightly built, very thin finished guitar. When you put finish on a guitar, when you put the heavier stuff that they have on the standard series, that kind of stuff, it hugs this wood and it forces the sound to bounce around in the sound chamber before it comes out. I'm not a physicist, but that's what it's like in my brain. Those lighter guitars don't do that, and they have a brighter, more vibrant sound to them. And but having the big slope shoulder dreadnought body brings in enough bass to really make those guitars sound really good. I'm a big fan of the DSS 17, even if I couldn't remember the name of it.
Oh yeah, all that to say, I wasn't wrong to make you name the whole thing from top to bottom the correct way.
Absolutely, you're completely correct.
Well, thank you very much, Spoon, and let me be the first to say it. You have been nothing but the best when it comes to working with somebody on YouTube and off. I want to say that talking about all these old memories when we first began working together, whether it was just in print or in website copy before it became videos, this whole thing has been nothing but great, and we would not be where we are today without Spoon Phillips being involved. So a sincere thank you. I don't want to say it too often. I don't want to make that ego get any bigger, and it'll have to be put in a new town because New York City is not big enough. But you've been the best, and I'm just really glad to have known you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. We definitely hit it off musically immediately, and I think we come from similar backgrounds and have a lot in common, and between you and Lori and I, and so it's been a very good friendship that also gets to be a partnership, and it's hard to ask for more than that from the closest people I've ever known to those people living in Bedford Falls. Put it that way.
So as some smarter people might say, after 22 years, we could say we're doing something right.
I guess so. I look forward to seeing you guys again. Maybe one of the reasons we get along so well is we never get to see each other, but we'll have to work out a visit sometime soon. Thank you very much for the suggestion. This was fun, letting us go down memory lane. So I appreciate that to our loyal listener who requested this topic.
Absolutely. And if you've enjoyed this program, whether it's this episode or another one, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. We might even read your review on the air. Dub1281 writes, Maury's definitely a friend of the forums with some of the questions he asks. Much appreciated. Well, thank you very much, Dub. I'm wholeheartedly proud to be a part of the unofficial Martin Guitar Forum and the Acoustic Guitar Forum, and we're glad you're there too. From all of us at Maury's Music, thanks for listening.
Hear you later.
This has been a presentation of Maury's Music, your trusted source for Martin and Blue Ridge guitars. Find us online at maurysmusic.com.